It was the end of April 1971. I climbed up the bank of the Rupert River and along with my pack sack, my geese, my pack sack, my shotgun, and I told my wife, she asked me, I said, well, how did it go? I said, we had a good day. We had a good hunt today, and I brought something back. So she quickly went to work on plugging the geese and getting the geese ready for supper. And then she said, you better listen to the radio. There's something about James Bay on the news.
Thus the James Bay Power Development, which he said his government is going ahead with. The James Bay development involves greater power potential than the present Labrador development, a deep-sea port, drastic changing of rivers flowing into the bay, and a spin-off that includes mining developments. Its estimated cost is $6 billion.
And my first reaction was, the impact of such a project on the people. Did I just go on my last spring hunt?
Hey, did you hear about the news? They saying, oh, really? Come on, are you kidding?
I didn't hear nothing until I got a radio message from Billy.
My home is going to be underwater. My father, who lived off the land, is going to be displaced.
I would say, I guess I was astonished more by the mere arrogance of the government.
I remember when Robert Wawasa was interviewed, and one of the people said, "Well, what about those Indians living in the James Bay project? What did you consult them?" And he says, "No, we didn't have to." And he says, "Well, we just give them a welfare check, and they're not going to say anything after." But he was wrong.
In early May of 1971, Smalley Batwapna was the chief of Mistini at the time. He agreed that we should have a gathering, a meeting of all the Cree communities that would be impacted by this announced project.
Philip wrote to me and said, we would like to organize this meeting in Mistassini. Would you be willing to come?
But the funding was not there to bring all these people together.
At that time, nobody really knew, but, the stakes were very high because, if we had lost the whole thing, the governments would run roughshod over the nation and do whatever they like in the territory.
I was belonging to association, what they called Indians of Quebec Association, and we have a little funding from the federal government. And I called the treasurer, which is Max Louis, was the chief at that time. And I said, look, we want to have a meeting. It's concerned about the James Bay project. They announced they're going to dam up all the major rivers in the James Bay.
This was a very important historic meeting for the Cree chiefs because this is not only the first time the Cree chiefs got together to discuss something of common interest. This meeting recognized the need to act in unity.
The feeling in that room was we will do every means possible to stop the project. Even the elders came out saying that the only ones we're going to let build dams in our territory are the beavers.
So we passed a resolution calling on the federal government to exercise its responsibilities, its trust responsibilities and roles to stop the James Bay Hydroelectric Development Project.
want the project to be stopped and settle the case once and for all. They say the land was never won in battle, the land was never given away, the land was never surrendered. So the only thing that happened was the land was stolen, and what is stolen must be returned. The showdown must come between the province and the Indian. It must come.
Quebec, as a state, was not very present in those territories, and it was important at the time, from a nationalist perspective, from a state-building, nation-building perspective, to occupy the land and take ownership of that land and make sure that the people living on that land would be part of that nationalist project, that Quebec project.
What Quebec did was it enacted a statute which in effect made the north of Quebec, which was the Cree and the Inuit territory, traditional territory, it almost made it a special colony under the control of this corporation called the James Bay Development Corporation, and that was Bill 50. And what that gave the board of directors the power to do was to develop natural resources essentially as it saw fit. We attacked that. We attacked that on the basis that it transgressed or violated the even Canadian and Quebec legislation, which had made that part of the land Quebec, because before that it was the Northwest Territories.
Ça fait 3 ans que je suggère au gouvernement, 3 ans que je suggère une politique de l'énergie qui va permettre d'attirer de nouvelles industries, parce qu'il y a des industries qui ne se développent qu'avec des types d'énergie. Alors il faut une politique de l'énergie.
Quebec decided to develop its hydroelectric potential, and that was mostly in the north. So it made sense at this point to turn its gaze to the north, to that from an energetic perspective. It was also a period of growth, demographic growth and economic growth in Quebec. And so the energetic needs of the province were a source of preoccupation, constant preoccupation. This was really a core period where both this looming energy crisis and Quebec nationalism met around this project, this James Bay hydroelectric development project that became the focus of that conflict between the Cree and Quebec, the Quebec state.
There were legal arguments for a number of days. Mr. O'Reilly and Peter Hutchins argued for the Cree people. And then the government lawyers were there as well. The Crown Corporation lawyers were there. And you could see that the government had money to spend on lawyers. You know, our little lawyer was sitting all by himself in a corner, and we didn't have the resources. We didn't have the money to hire a team of 20 lawyers.
We got past the first hurdle. Judge Maloof ruled that we did have a right to be heard. Now the real fight would begin. The hearing would last 3 months, with 167 witnesses testifying.
This is the first time that a lot of them had been out of their own community. The first time that I remember an elder questioning how a jet airplane can take off since there are no propellers on a jet plane. And he said he was almost hesitant to get on the plane.
They will ask me questions like, where are the children? Because one rarely sees children downtown Montreal.
The other factor is the number of homeless people that our people were seeing on the side of the street and so on, and that was very new to them.
Or does the city ever sleep? Because the traffic goes on all night.
In the north, if you see somebody that is helpless and needs some help, they don't hesitate to give them whatever it needs to try and help that person out.
Muun jabat ko kiwa suit ma daban doing suitat. Kaya na yun you have tan gan skus ma negay nabas. Bas kun jaun skadayas. Kaya hakut ka hadbis chayan ka hadbis tigdayas hindi mamannan. Nigian sa hadbis chan ka hadbis chanot. Man sure bas kun jaun kung sinjitana.
The Indians and Inuit of northern Quebec in December 1972 went to Superior Court in Montreal in an effort to bring the giant project to a halt. More than 40 hunters told the court about Cree and Inuit life as hunters. Many of them had never been in a city before.
O'Reilly argued that the Crees had been exercising their right to the land since time immemorial, including the right to hunt, fish, and trap, and that constituted title over the land. The government argued that we had no rights to the land. At most, we were entitled to some compensation, and maybe some reserves set aside for us. The government also claimed that we weren't really Cree anymore, that we lived in regular houses, ate store-bought food, and relied on government help.
We were sitting there and we were all quite nervous. Then the judge says, Mr. O'Reilly, you can call your first witness. James O'Reilly gets up and says, I call Chief Billy Diamond to the stand. So O'Reilly asked me who I was, my name, where I came from, where I was born. I was able to say that I was born on the bush. I was born in the spring of 1949. And it was the annual spring hunt, and I was able to describe the annual spring hunt.
Each chief have to testify to different things. I was asked to testify to describe the territory. It was about 100 to 80,000 square miles. And every year, those territories were being occupied by the trappers.
Or another trapper being asked, how big is your trap line? And he says, oh, I don't know, I didn't measure it. It's quite big, but I know the boundary of it. Is it as big as Montreal, the island of Montreal? And the trapper says, well, I don't know how big is the island of Montreal? How long would it take you to walk around the island of Montreal? I know how long it will take me to walk around my trap line. Those were the kind of responses sometimes,
We described our lives as best we could, and Judge Malouf was very attentive. But now it was the government's turn to ask the questions.
One of our tremendous witnesses at that court case was Billy Diamond. They tried to put him on the spot, more or less to deny that some of these things are wrong, but they couldn't.
I didn't know how to react at first. At first, I was kind of angry. And I said, uh-oh, I'm going through Indian residential school system again. Here's another way of government telling me that I have no rights.
In this courtroom, we weren't just fighting the government and the corporations. We were also fighting time. The battle was fought in English, French, and Cree, with our translators struggling to bridge the language divide.
It was quite a difficult task trying to explain something that is almost virtually unexplainable in Cree to elders and lawyers trying to tell you, please just translate it. And, you have to give some explanation. When you talk to a long, they start to be concerned.
Today, in a stunning setback to the Quebec government, Superior Court Justice Albert Malouf said the area cannot be developed without the prior consent of its Indian and Eskimo inhabitants. In a 170-page judgment, he said the James Bay project will have a devastating and far-reaching effect on the area's native people.
For the Quebec government and its corporations, the ruling came as a huge shock. It established that the Crees and the Inuit had apparent rights that could not simply be dismissed. Was this the end of Bourassa's dream?
We didn't create the nightmare for Bourassa. He created the nightmare himself in his failure to consult us and recognize our rights and also failing to acknowledge our presence.
It really was a battle of survival of the people. And as it turned out, of course, Justice Malouf rendered a great judgment in favor of the Crees. That meant that his findings could never be erased in history.
Our rights for the first time were being mentioned. And our way of life, to hunt, fish, and trap as a way of life, was seen as a valuable way of life, was seen by the court as a way of life that was important, and this tradition should remain. So it was a great, great victory.
But of course, there was an appeal process.
The government decided to go to the Court of Appeal. And at the Court of Appeal, we lost because we were only 5,000 Cree and Inuit. And 5,000 people were not as important as 5 million Quebecers.
In the winter of '73, rumors began circulating about backroom negotiations between the government and the Indians of Quebec Association.
At that time, the IQA represent all the First Nation in Quebec, and of course, we were representing the James Bay Crees.
Robert Canadawat calls me and says, Billy, he said, there's an offer from Robert Bourassa being circulated. He said, it was sent to the Indians of Quebec Association.
If we focus on the James Bay development there, we had the mandate to defend the way that the Crees want their rights and to protect their rights, of course, and their land.
The Indians of Quebec Association, they were not only negotiating for the Cree, they wanted to include all the Native people in Quebec.
The Crees were highly sympathetic to that, but the immediate fight was James Bay because there was a timeline, there was a schedule, there was a project, and the Crees were saying, if we have to negotiate and wait, the project is going to be built.
Then on December 10th, in an effort to pressure the Crees into accepting his offer, Bourassa went public.
In Montreal, Premier Bourassa and his chief advisor on Indian matters, John Chacha, have summoned the newsmen for what's billed as an important announcement on the James Bay project.
With a report from Montreal, April 11, Bourassa made the offer public at a time when government negotiators and Indian representatives are negotiating a settlement of the disputed area of James Bay.
It was an 11-point offer. It was a $100 million offer, and we were not happy with it. It did not contain the issues that we wanted to see.
I was surprised. Personally, I was very, very surprised to hear that he had made an announcement as to the proposal. And I was hoping that at least he would give us the opportunity to talk to our people first and let our people give their reactions, and in turn we could try and
transmitted the messages to their negotiator, John Sietch, and we could have told him how we felt about the proposal.
Our people needed to see the offer. But first, our leaders wanted to have an opportunity to discuss it amongst themselves.
This was the first regional entity that was ever created to speak for the Crees and act for the Crees. This was a political organization it was prime mandate at that time was to fight the hydro project and any development that came into the area.
The James Bay project was progressing on schedule. 203 million cubic yards of fill, 138,000 tons of steel, 550,000 tons of cement, and nearly 70,000 tons of explosives would be used in the initial stages. Once built, there would be no going back. For the Quebec government and its crown corporations, there was no urgency to resolve anything. For us, it meant that every day was crucial. The courts had refused to hear our counter-appeal to the injunction ruling, and we could not afford to wait on the court to rule on our challenge to Bill 50 and the Cree rights to the land. So we changed our strategy. We agreed to negotiate and used the threat of further court challenges as a fallback position.
The decision in favor of the Crees to stop the project temporarily was a leverage in the negotiations, that in court now you became a danger, that the other side, the government side, now had to think of dealing with you.
Robert Bourassa asked me to negotiate to be his special representative, and he gave me no directives.
Mr. Chacha had to, of course, come to the realization and acceptance that these young individuals, like myself, Ted Moses, Chief Billy Diamond, were the representatives and negotiators for the Cree.
Every once in a while, somebody would crack a joke, and people would laugh, you know. Finally, I guess the Quebec people were kind of a little paranoid and said, "You guys are not serious." I said, "Okay, if you think we're not serious, why don't some of you guys come up to one of the Cree communities? We'll show you how serious we are."
The government negotiators accepted the Cree challenge to attend a community meeting in Fort George. They really had no idea what they were walking into.
There was only two people there, myself and Armand Coutu, the representative of the Energy Corporation.
And Giacho opened the meeting by saying that he was there and he thought talking could help resolve the differences between people, but he wasn't there to negotiate, he said, in the usual sense.
One of the questions I asked Mr. Chiech is, how can the government say that they own this land? Say the Cree own this land, you know, here long before then. And then his response basically was, well, the government, no. They had offered, actually, so much land to the Cree. And I asked him, how can you offer us something that's ours?
Maybe they expected me to say, okay, you're against it, the project won't go ahead. I couldn't do that. I had to find ways and means to allow the project to go through and to respect and recognize the rights of the Crees.
There was some very strong statements. People said, "You're a wolf in sheep's clothes." A man said, "I've spoken the truth and the truth can't be denied." A woman said, "You're a devil."
Well, they just were dead set against the project. And they didn't want to hear anything about it. And
it's understanding that people were angry.
Very, very tense.
Hydro-Quebec and Quebec government were about to embark on what the people considered the destruction of their land, the river, their way of life, their culture.
I had the representative from the Energy Corporation. And when the meeting was over, he said, John, he says, we're only going to be able to build this project with the Army. So I started with Billy Diamond and some of the other chiefs. And it took us 1 year to get that agreement in principle. And it covered, money I would say was a secondary aspect. It covered all of the other points that were important to the Crees.
Rights was a big issue on the rights over land, the different type of rights with regards to hunting, fishing, and trapping, that to the greatest extent possible that we should continue and maintain those rights which we had before, whether they were recognized or not.
So I was personally involved in negotiating hunting, fishing, trapping rights, the recognition and protection of hunting, fishing, trapping rights.
We included things such as control over education, Crees running their own education, control over health and social services.
I was also involved and in charge of negotiating the social and environmental protection regime.
Environment wasn't such a hot issue in the 1970s. And I think we may have lent some principles or some thoughts which contributed towards the evolution of environmental thinking in Quebec, or maybe.
Standing tall, though it seemed like we might fall, one voice, we have the choice, we understand all the virtues of the land, and we will fight what is right, 'cause we are